Hello and welcome, and thank you for being here on this World Month, this global celebration of our planet, which is fantastic. My name is Terry Meir, and I'll be your host today. We are proud to host these free classes every week to help connect us all to our regenerative ecosystem. You can learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. Today, we're talking about community composting, and this is such an exciting topic. And we have Charlie Pioli, who started O-Town Compost to give his neighbors a sustainable option for their food scraps. I have watched Charlie from afar, and his idea sprouted from just this. It's grown into one of the finest examples of grassroots composting in Florida that I've seen. And I'm really excited to have Charlie here to answer all our compost questions. If you have any questions for Charlie, please type them into the chat box and we'll make sure we get everybody answered by the end of the class. So thank you for the work you do, Charlie, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. And I do remember at the Permaculture Convergence a little over a year ago, that's when I just started the business. And yeah, I had time to go to a permaculture conference, which I can't imagine having that time anymore. So that's crazy. But yeah, let me start the presentation. Thanks everyone for joining me. Um, I'm Charlie Pioli, founder of O-Town Compost, based here in Orlando, Florida. Our service area stretches through all of Orange County, most of Orange County, Seminole, and soon going to be looking at Osceola County. But I started the business about a year ago, and I moved down to Florida originally from Boston, Massachusetts, where I went to college, and I was a subscriber of Bootstrap Compost. They're based out of Boston, and I thought their idea was so cool, just giving you a 5-gallon bucket and picking it up on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, composting your scraps, and then returning the compost to you. I lived in an apartment at the time, and there was really no other option for recycling my food waste. And then I moved down to Orlando, Florida for a job in solid waste consulting. And those 3+ years in solid waste consulting, I was exposed to our country's waste management infrastructure, traveling to landfills and recycle centers around the country. And it kind of busted my idea of what I thought about recycling being like the only solution for environmental benefits with solid waste. And it left a pretty strong impression on me. So just a little bit about O-Town Compost and our composting method. O-Town Compost is, when I started about a year ago, we were the only food waste recycler in the Orlando metro area. There was Power Harvest, the anaerobic digester, who is co-located at Disney. But in the middle of the pandemic, they shut their doors for good because they stopped receiving their biggest feedstock was coming from Disney. And when Disney slowed down, they had to close for good. So that really only leaves O-Town Compost as the city's only food waste recycler. And, there's loads of food waste, way more than I can currently handle right now, but that's what we're moving towards capturing. We do zero waste events and weddings, which is, a great way to capture. The average American wedding produces about 400 pounds of trash. And my background is in serving for a catering company in Boston. So I would see the egregious amount of food waste being bagged and taken out the door every night. And I really feel like zero waste events are important service to have if you're a community composter. Commercial service, this I I hope everyone is aware that Residential versus commercial is a difference in a lot of food waste. Commercials like your restaurants, your cafes, your offices, that's where you're going to see the bulk of the food waste as a one-time generator. But if the average household produces about 11 pounds of food waste a week is what I've found. The average restaurant, is producing a few hundred pounds. But overall, when those trucks are dumping food waste at the landfill, commercial and residential waste streams are about equal. There's enough households to equal the same amount of businesses. So neither one should be discounted. A lot of people when I was starting was like, "Oh, are you just doing restaurants?" And they were assuming that that's the only place that food waste is to be found in sizable quantities. But if you get enough residential subscribers, you're diverting a significant portion of waste. We're currently using ASP system, aerated static pile. And, I started with like a palleted bay system. I built some bays and I was incorporating wood chips with the food waste. And I even was lucky enough to come across some horse manure. But quickly I was turning it with a pitchfork, and quickly I outgrew that. And my back is thanking me because I have an aerated static pile. I don't need to turn it, and it's very low maintenance. Although you do need to empty these bins, about once a month. But the great thing with aerated static piles, no turning, no odors or pests because the piles get very hot. And you can put a biofilter on the top of the compost pile, which kind of acts as a remediation layer, suppressing those foul odors, which are always stemming from usually like anaerobic conditions. But these ASP bins, they force air into the pile, which really provides that aeration to encourage the bacterial activity to, not go, the pile doesn't go anaerobic. So as long as you're doing it right, you shouldn't be getting pests or odors. And yeah, after about a year and a few months, we've composted over 100,000 pounds. And just to give you an idea of the scale, I think every year 350,000 tons of organic waste go to the Orange County landfill. So that is, there's constant room for growth. Okay, and I was coming from that career in solid waste, and originally I was very interested in standard recycling of bottles, cans, paper, fiber, and I quickly realized, how I started to question how many environmental benefits is recycling offering us really. If we're trucking recyclables to the nearest recycle center, they're baling it, shipping it around the globe to remanufacture and send us, if you're talking about plastic recycling, they're just sending us like junky products, or they're turning it into polyester that, that it's like one more life for this material. And it's, I started to become disenchanted. Organic waste makes up about half of what's going to the landfill, 50% of what we're throwing in the trash. And not only that, it's producing the greenhouse gas emissions at the landfill. If anyone has been to a landfill, I would highly recommend trying to tour your local landfill so you can see the process. But imagine from sun up to sundown, garbage trucks are dumping into the landfill. And then every day by law, the landfill managers have to cover that trash with a 6-inch layer of dirt, which suppresses the oxygen and creates an anaerobic environment, basically mummifying the trash. And, that's the difference between throwing your banana peel on the ground and letting it decompose. Sure, that produces a little CO2, but then, the soil sequesters that CO2, and like the process of composting creates CO2, but then when you have finished compost, it's again sequestering it. At the landfill, there's none of that. It's only producing methane. And these landfills are now, say they're capturing the methane and producing electricity. Well, I mean, they are, but probably only 10% of the methane that's being released into the atmosphere. And as most people know, methane is way more potent of a greenhouse gas to accelerate climate change. Single stream. The reason I chose community composting over recycling with my career is recycling has shifted from dual stream, where you have your fiber and containers separately, to single stream, where you can just throw everything in the same bin, and it's led to rampant contamination. Orlando's up in the 30 to 40% contamination range, and Miami is like closer to 50. But by contamination, I mean things that don't belong in the recycling stream. And I was just doing a sort at the Orange County landfill of Orange County recyclables. And you see everything from food waste to dirty diapers to these ticky tacky little plastics that, people assume it's recyclable because it's plastic. They throw it in. And that's what we call wish cycling in the industry, is hoping it's recyclable. And the great thing about community composting, it keeps the waste local. It's not being transported very far, if at all. And it fosters life and returns nutrients to the community. And here in Central Florida, our soil, or sandy soil, could really use some improvement. So yeah, what we do with our compost as a business is we return 20-pound shares of finished compost to our residential subscribers. We donate a good portion to urban farmers like Fleet Farming, or we just donated a bunch to Four Roots Farm here in Orlando. Anyone who's growing veggies locally. And we also sell a little bit of our compost too, whatever is in excess, which isn't a whole lot these days, because as a small business, we're focused on recycling the food waste, not so much processing into, a commodity like, a soil amendment. But of course, compost is the byproduct of our food waste recycling. And, I hope one day we can have be supplying all of Central Florida with finished compost, except especially now that Monterey Mushroom has kind of no longer offering their byproduct. And I think a lot of people feel like, well, I don't have to tell this to you guys. You're here at Sustainable Kashi's event, so that's like preaching to the choir. So yeah, I started my podcast about 3 months ago, and the podcast is called the Community Composting Podcast. It represents the grassroots movement of community composters around the nation who are doing what O-Town Compost is doing, picking up, collecting food waste locally, composting it locally, and really kind of filling this niche in the market that big waste haulers like Waste Management and Republic, Waste Pro, they have no interest in doing right now. So collecting food waste is relatively up and coming component in the waste industry. And I just want to mention that big waste is what I like to call them. That's your Waste Management, Republic services. That you need to kind of see the big picture of how our solid waste is managed in this country. And you know, big waste has been just engaged in constant like consolidation, mergers and acquisitions. And you know, it's all about vertical integration and scale. So, you know, what they're mostly interested in is because they're publicly traded on Wall Street. So they're mostly interested in managing landfills and garbage hauling. They do have recycling components to their portfolios, but their recycling is just a fraction of their portfolio. They just pretty much keep the recycling in order to say, hey, look, we recycle and you know we care. I think this picture is pretty ironic. Like, what if everything could be used? Or another slogan on the side of management trucks are "Think green." You know, I just think that there's a lot of greenwashing going on in the industry with big waste haulers, as well as another one I struggle with as a community composter is there's a lot of compostable products out there like bioplastics and you know, other things that just don't break down well. And just because you add like 50%, you mix petroleum based plastic with some cornstarch doesn't mean it's gonna break down, especially not in like you know, even my ASP bin, which I feel like is relatively advanced, it doesn't break down well. So community composting is kind of in contrast to the big waste industry. And so far, community composters have been growing like very large, not as large as waste management, but significant to where they're diverting significant organic waste from the landfill. So honestly, I think it's a matter of time before big waste gets into the community composting game and you know, maybe buys up a couple community composters and you know, hopefully stays true to the mission. um, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. So when I was last there, I toured their composting facility where they take the residential yard and food waste. In the city of Portland, they have curbside composting. Every household is given a green bin where they can put their yard waste and food waste. You know, this is the case for Austin, Texas, San Francisco. New York City had it, but then ran out of funding, so they shut that down. But what's kind of interesting about composting at the larger scale, you know, they're still using ASP system. That's the picture you see is on the left side of that picture. They have the long rows of compost and they're pumping oxygen underneath it with perforated pipe. On the right side of that picture, well, it's negative aeration. So rather than pumping the oxygen into the piles, they're pulling the oxygen into the piles. So what you see on the right side of that picture is the air being dispersed underneath a biofilter layer, a layer of just wood chips. And that's so they don't get any neighborhood complaints. And they're not releasing, you know, odors into the atmosphere. Even if there's a slight whiff of anything, you know, there's a chance someone in the neighborhood will freak out. So yeah, I mean, community composting is kind of in contrast to this large scale composting, and it means composting anywhere from like on school grounds. It means micro hauling, and I use a pickup truck to collect my food waste, but there's bike haulers in New York City and other cities that are, you know, they have a trailer hooked up to their bike and they're collecting buckets and it's, you know, zero emissions. It's actually really cool. But I think for O-Town Compost to make an impact in Orange County, where 350,000 tons a year are produced of organic waste, I need to get to that large scale where I have a couple different in huge composting sites that is able to actually take a bite out of that organic waste going to the landfill. So community composting started, I would arguably say it started out of Maine about a decade ago. I'm not sure who started it, but it was as simple as saying, "Hey, I'll collect your food scraps. Here's a couple 5-gallon buckets. I'll swap them out on your porch and take them back and compost them." And now, if you look at that Maine, New England region, Vermont, they have such a low rate of food waste going to their landfills, and it's really created a culture around solid waste where the landfill is really the last option for them. So, that's the other part about community composting, is just changing how Americans think about their food waste and yard trimmings. And that's why I really love starting programs in, Orange County public schools and elementary schools, where you just know you're like creating habits with kids at a very young age. And this map shows you the pins represent where community composters are located, but I would argue that a community composter is popping up every day in the country these days. I'm on Instagram, and I feel like people are always reaching out to me to ask advice, and I always refer them to my podcast where I interview these established community composters, and they really have been doing it longer than me. So they will kind of give you a better idea and inspiration. Here's my idol, Bootstrap Compost out of Boston, Massachusetts. Like I said, I was a subscriber for them briefly before I moved to Orlando. They've grown in the last 4 years since I've left Boston. Now they're servicing not only Boston, Worcester, Providence, Rhode Island, but they're one of their routes I've heard in Boston is like upwards of 800 stops in one day. To give you an idea, my biggest route in Winter Park is like 60 stops. So, they're really doing it at a large scale, and, they've composted over 8 million pounds. So, just to give Rob Greenfield an idea how many a million pounds is. Um, and the cool thing about Bootstrap is there's not a lot of land in the Boston metro area to compost. So what they do is they partner with farms around the Boston area, and they every week they haul what they collect to the farms, which does the composting and uses the soil amendment on their farms. And I think they have Bootstrap, gets a small amount of that compost that they can return to their subscribers. Rust Belt Riders are another very, I would say, like one of the most successful, based in Cleveland, Ohio. They have, like, prior to the pandemic, they had 200 commercial clients and, close to 1,000 residential. They're diverting 700 tons a year from the landfill. And they're also like soil science experts. They're the guys who, alongside their hauling company, they have like a soil amendment company, and they'll legit like look at their soil under a microscope and can tell if there's biodiversity and how that translates into plant health too. I thought, like, the rumor in the community composting industry was that they were partnering with a black soldier fly larva company out of Canada. But I don't think that's true, actually, now that I last talked with them. But I feel like that's the future of food waste recycling is black soldier fly larvae, because we've all seen how they chomp through compost in our own piles. Um, what like So O Town Compost is not only a food waste collector, but we're a processor because we do the composting ourselves. So I'm really running two businesses right now, the collection side and the processing side. Um, as my subscribers grow and my clients grow, I need to find a solution for that food waste and how to properly compost it. And Big Reuse in Queens, New York, they're located right under the Queensboro Bridge, which is amazing that they're able to have this composting site in an urban area. You think they would be getting complaints all the time, but what they use is a Gore blanket technology. It's like a blanket that breathes. They put over the composting pile. It's ASP, so they force oxygen underneath it. And in about 2 months, they have finished compost. But this was a technology I was looking at myself. It's not very cheap, but it can process about 15 tons a week. And right now, New York City, a city of 8 million people, doesn't really have a strong solution for all that organic waste. So really the community composters in New York are the only ones diverting organic waste and recycling it. And the compost is going back to the community, like urban farmers. I just had Xander Shaw with Red Hook Community Farm on my podcast, the most recent episode. And it's right there in the heart of Brooklyn. And they're able to get through like 20 tons of food waste a week. But it, it, it really sucks because the city's Department of Sanitation was funding the community composters, and now they're pulling funding. So I don't understand why. I mean, New York, just to give you an idea, the city of New York's solid waste contract with waste management is like $2 trillion. It's huge. And that's for their garbage, which New York City like loads their garbage on trains, takes it as far as Virginia or South Carolina just to get it out of the city, just to remove it from the city. The Compost Queens was another Kate with Compost Queens. I had her on my podcast. Her and her mom started the business when San Antonio didn't really have a good solution for recycling their organic waste. Now the city of San Antonio has curbside composting, but the Compost Queens, they really give access to composting for those apartment dwellers and anyone who lives in a building that doesn't have like a curbside bin they can take to the curb. And what's unique about them is they use the Japanese bokashi method of composting, which is they have 5 gallon buckets they give their subscribers. They give them a bag of grain or bran for fermenting. The subscriber is told to sprinkle a little bran in their bucket, close the lid for about 2 weeks. And when you open up that lid in 2 weeks, it has like a sweet fermenting smell, and it's rich with bacteria life. And you just add that to your garden, and it's really amazing. And they're able to do 20 tons of food scraps per month. So even though the city of San Antonio is doing composting, there's plenty of food waste out there that they're another key piece of the city's infrastructure. I don't know if anyone saw that documentary "Kiss the Ground" on Netflix. It was a great one, so I highly recommend it. But LA Compost was featured in it, and they're a decentralized network of community farms or small community gardens around Los Angeles, which is a huge sprawl. So basically, what they do is, people in that neighborhood bring their food waste to the farm, and a lot of the time, they like work out like a system where if you're bringing your food waste, you also have to, volunteer 1 or 2 hours a month and process the compost. And they're despite the small scale of it, they're able to divert 250 tons a year. And yeah, they're only growing. There's also another pickup service in Los Angeles. They're called Compostable LA. So there's, lots of room for both the drop off option of the drop off model as well as the pickup model. Right now, O Town Compost is really only focused on the pickup model. So, um, yeah, so I just want to mention that, like, in the future, like I said, there's a lot of food waste out there. And if I'm going to make a impact on it and really extend the life of Orange County landfill, I need to scale up to the municipal level. Cities like Portland, Oregon, or Austin, Texas are doing. And, that's why I have my feelers out for grant funding to start a curbside pilot program. And I recently heard that one of Florida's senators introduced a bill in the state legislature mandating commercial food waste generators of 1 ton per week to start recycling the organics. And, that means all restaurants, caterers, cafes would actually have to start diverting their food waste. And this is a bill that, I've seen it introduced in Massachusetts when I was living there. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be enforcement around it, but it is a good start in the right generation. And it would really encourage the infrastructure to get in place to be able to handle all this food waste. If that bill passed today, I would be scrambling to meet that kind of capacity. And then also, I hope Orange County landfill has tons of land out there. I think it's the biggest landfill in the state of Florida. I'm hoping to co-locate my industrial scale composting site right at the landfill. So, there's no odor complaints because the garbage is what's stinky. And um, yeah, I just think it would be a great opportunity to efficiently use land that's already out there. So last slide, I just want to tell you a little bit about O Town Compost. For you residential subscribers, every other week collection is $22 a month. Weekly pickups is $30 a month. I'm happy to give you your first month free if you want to subscribe. Just use that promo code. And yeah, I mean, it's been just fun doing it. And I have like a team of drivers and warehouse people that just are helping me out. And it's fun. You feel like you're on a mission, so it's fun. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions right now.
Wonderful. Oh, Charlie, thank you so much. I actually have quite a few questions for you. And if anybody has a question, please just type it in to the chat box. I want to start with a little bit of technical, like what are the rules and is there anything that can't be added to the compost or, meats, breads, things like that?
Yeah, so if you're backyard composting like passively, I would probably say refrain from adding meat, dairy. Um, you could, but you would have to kind of bury it in the center of your pile where it's going to be the hottest, and that would deter any critters from digging in. And yeah, but the cool thing about ASP composting, it's almost like assured you're going to hit that temperature threshold of 131 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's where it's killing the pathogens, weed seeds, and larvae.
Excellent, excellent. I have a question about someone asked if they could just bury green stuff under the soil and plant right into that.
Um, I'm assuming that means like nitrogen, food
I
waste.
imagine like kitchen scraps and things like that.
Yeah, you can bury it into the ground, and I have done that. It kind of reminds me of like the landfill though, where you're burying food waste, and it probably is producing a little bit of methane, but it's probably not significant. So it is improving your soil though.
Yeah, I've used that for doing food forests, just making large in-place compost piles, then planting right into the compost piles.
Yeah,
I had
you're
pretty good,
bound to get a lot of volunteers too.
right, right, squashes and tomatoes. How about biochar? Have you thought about moving into the biochar world as far as what to do with thicker debris and soil additives?
Yeah, so I imagine my composting site in like 5 to 10 years is gonna have like 10 different blends of compost. You have your dark mulch, you have a biochar compost, you have vermicompost, and then just the O-Town Black Gold is what I call the normal compost. So
I look forward to seeing all those product lines very soon. We have a question of, do you mix paper with the food waste?
yeah, so in our program we accept paper towels, craft paper, uncoated paper plates or cups, and those break down just fine in the ASP system. The only thing is, a couple of times, people confuse the the wipes with paper towels, and those don't break down. So be wary of those.
Is there anything else that you ask people not to add into the compost?
Our biggest contaminant is fruit stickers, but we can't do anything about those. I do reoccurring Instagram posts, like take them off, but that's so little. I'm not gonna like our service is about convenience, and they're not gonna like really tip the scales in the wrong way. But the biggest content the second biggest contaminant is wax coated paper products. We accept uncoated paper products, but those waxy like solo plates or um like Starbucks cups, yeah, those don't break down because they have like a poly coated layer on the inside to keep the cup's integrity.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you had mentioned bokashi, and do you know the name of the additive that you add? Is it a EM1? You said a grain product.
Yeah, it's some kind of grain or bran. And, I would encourage going on the Compost Queen's website and checking it out. But I know people who make their own out of coffee chaff and some other things. So, yeah, it's a fermentation process. It's really cool.
Yeah, that is a very effective composting method that will take about just any meat or any harder to compost
Yeah,
type.
they're able to do it like commercial scale with big barrels of food waste that they, will compost a whole like rain barrel at a time, or a whole, brute barrel or something like that.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you have the brand of ASP that you're currently using?
So I would encourage you to email me at o-towncompost.com. But yeah, it is I do have a particular brand that I would be happy to share. I think it's O2 Compost on their website, but I can give you more direction in that if you email me.
Beautiful. So you touched on a subject that's pretty passionate to me, and that's the wish cycling subject. We are very used to people throwing number sevens and number fives in the recycling bin and thinking that they're getting recycled. What are you finding? What is the percentage of things that people are throwing into their recycling bin actually get recycled? And I know this isn't a compost question, but I do think it has a lot to do with the
Yeah,
regenerative cycle.
yeah. I mean, I'm very passionate about solid waste in general, but I think, well, like I said, the contamination rate in Central Florida is probably like 30 to 40%. And that just means that the other part of the recycling stream, the 60%, is actually going to the recycle center, going across the conveyor belts and getting like baled and being, it's a commodity that's being shipped. That doesn't necessarily mean it's offering a lot of great environmental benefits. Like aseptic pouches and cartons are technically recyclable. Glass bottles are technically recyclable, but it's very energy intensive to actually, take those apart and produce a new product. So I leave my glass bottles out of. I just trash them and try to buy aluminum, beer cans. But I think I think overall, the strongest things that you should always recycle are aluminum cans, steel cans, mixed paper like your junk mail, cereal boxes, and definitely cardboard. Oh yeah, and then HDPE like number two bottles. They have a strong commodity market these days. So make sure you're recycling your like laundry detergent bottles or milk jugs.
Thank you, Charlie. It's the work you do is just so beneficial, and I'm really grateful that you've dedicated so much of your time and energy into it. And thank you for being here and sharing it all with us. Can you share with us the easiest way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think I just saw Amy post that in the chat box, but it's info@o-towncompost.com. I'm if you're interested in starting your own community composting outfit, like I think Liz said she would, I would highly recommend listening to the podcast, seeing what other community composters are doing out there. I mean, I can guarantee it'll inspire you. And yeah, it's easy to start small, and who knows where you can go. So
You are an inspiration to me, and I hope to very many. Thank you very much for being here.
yeah,
Oh,
thanks so much for having me.
absolutely. Anytime. I want to thank Amy Zelt for doing all the production for our class. These things don't happen without all those buttons in the background. Thank you very much. And of course, everybody on the call, this doesn't happen with your time, with your energy, and your donations. Thank you very much. We're going to continue this conversation. If you want any composting questions answered in our Facebook group, and Amy will post that link below. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah.
Together, we're strong. Community grassroots functions build us up. They make us stronger. Like a blanket has many threads, we're strong together. With the diversity of our community, anything is possible. So thank you all for doing this work, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlie.
Take care.